Hey y'all, I'm Hannah Ray. I'm an astrologer and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is indeed my first video. I've been doing podcasting and writing Substack for a while, but wanted to try my hand here, especially because this year has so much really impactful astrology that I think we're all going to be feeling on a collective level. So wanted to hop on here before we dive into this month of February, give you a bit of a rundown and see where it takes us. Bear with me here as I get my bearings and as I battle this particular bang. I can just feel it is already going to annoy me, but I will prevail. This month starts off strong with a full moon in Leo on February 1st. This is the last full moon in Leo that will not be an eclipse for the next year and a half. Don't worry, we will come back to that in a bit. Full moons in Leo are about authenticity and embodiment. This one in particular will be coming fresh off of an opposition with Mars and Pluto, where perhaps we find ourselves navigating how to balance our needs versus others. When the moon makes hard aspects, like a square or an opposition to Mars and Pluto, it usually represents something along the lines of a challenge that we can feel on both a physical and an emotional level. This full moon is shining a light on how we take these challenges while staying true to our needs, our values, and our identity. Since there is a whole party going on in Aquarius, the moon is going to be triggered by several situations right in a row. First, a deep truth from Pluto, then a challenge from Mars. Next comes an illumination from the sun, followed by an affirmation through some form of communication as she opposes Venus and Mercury at the same time. So in this time period, give yourself some time and space to move through the roller coaster of experiences and emotions that are likely to come up on this day, and maybe use this energy to reorient yourself towards what makes you feel like you. Like, how do you like showing up in the world? What is most important to you right now? How can the simple act of caring for yourself form the cornerstone of your personal revolution? The next thing I want to mention kind of sets the tone for the entire month. Uranus, over at 27 degrees of Taurus, stations direct on February 4th. So Uranus is this energy of invention, disruption, change, and shifting. And mythologically, Uranus embodies the story of Prometheus, of the one who went and stole fire from the gods to gift humanity with technology and civilization, essentially. In transit, Uranus often signifies where we are experiencing disruption that inspires complete overhaul and reinvention of the standard of being. So since September 6th of 2025, Uranus has been retrograde. I'm going to talk more about retrograde of it all when I get to something later in the month, or maybe a Mercury retrograde on its way. But anyway, retrogrades are typically a time where we're going back, we're rewinding, we're reviewing, we are figuring out how to make something work that was made clear to us is not working. When Uranus is retrograde, there's a lot of internal change happening on both a personal and a collective level. So we're going back and investigating these shifts in an internal way in terms of like what we're feeling, what we're wanting. And then when Uranus stations direct, that internal change starts being reflected externally. So in Taurus, Uranus has had a lot to do with our resources and our physical stability. I think this particular retrograde has been teaching us about what we truly need to survive versus what we've been taught to value. So there's a lot of discourse I'm seeing about getting away from social media, getting back into physical community with one another, and just like this overall exhaustion with consumerism and capitalism. So I think we're going to start reinventing or shifting away from those kind of tenets once Uranus stations direct. I will come back to more about Uranus's role in this month as I go throughout the rest of the transits, but I think the direct station is going to fuel a lot of shifting and changing that is on deck for the month, because this astrology is kind of all about change. On Saturday the 7th, Mercury is the first to leave the Aquarius party and enter Pisces. Okay, so in the astroscape of February, there's so much going on that I think this transit might be ignored or kind of just fade into the background. but it is gonna form the undercurrent of the entire month. When Mercury enters Pisces, it almost immediately begins its shadow period because, like I said, you guessed it, Mercury goes retrograde in Pisces this month. This is going to be a good thing, and stick with me on this, okay? Mercury retrogrades get a lot of flack from pop culture and pop astrology and social media as this like catch-all time of mess and mayhem and things are going wrong and why is my life a mess? Oh, it's Mercury and Gatorade or whatever, you know? So there's a lot of that kind of chatter that goes on this when we have retrogrades. But what I don't think people realize about Mercury retrogrades is that these are extremely important to the continued functioning of daily life, like in our bodies, in our minds, in our technology, in our communication, in our transportation. Like those are all the things that Mercury rules, okay? So these are the times when, yes, issues are discovered and highlighted, which can be uncomfortable. Oh, hi, Ralph. But what typically happens when we discover a glaring issue? What happens, Ralph? We have to fix it. Say hi to the people. This is Ralph. He absolutely will be disturbing us from time to time, and he loves doing it. Love you, baby. Okay, down you go. I'm afraid he's gonna bite me though, because he really loves violence, and that makes me nervous. Okay, getting back into it. As Mercury transits 8 degrees through 22 degrees of Pisces here, it is passing over the degrees that it will travel back over during its retrograde. So Mercury traditionally does not super love Pisces. Like Mercury likes, oh hey buddy, facts, figures, data, spreadsheets, communication, clarity, whereas Pisces prefers imagination and creativity and dreaming and using your intuition. So this kind of environment makes Mercury's job a little bit harder. Like, how do we quantify our imagination? How do we put our dreams into a spreadsheet? Ralphie. So while Mercury won't station retrograde until the 25th, I think this particular shadow period is going to be really illuminating for us. The shadow period is the time where we notice what isn't working, where Mercury is in fact traipsing through the aftermath of Saturn's like run through Pisces, and starting to point out perhaps where we need more freedom, more flexibility, or even to reinforce structures around our dreams and spirituality. Like what structures did Saturn leave behind that maybe need to be readjusted now that he's on his way out? So once we get to the actual retrograde, we'll get to work, but first we do need to notice. And in a time where we're noticing a lot of things all at once, like I already said, I think this particular shadow period is going to be the undercurrent that carries us to a place where there is no more noticing to be done, only action to be taken. Thankfully, amidst the whole shadow period, we are going to have Venus traveling through Pisces as well. Unlike Mercury, Venus loves Pisces, okay? Here she can dance and splash and flirt and bask and soak and just eat it up. Like she's just enjoying all the textures and flavors and the low-key Delulu vibes that Jupiter, which is the ruler of Pisces, has set up in this space. But before she can get there, she does have to square off with Uranus. Now, remember I said I was coming back to this. Like I mentioned earlier, Uranus is sitting at like 27 to 28 degrees of Taurus throughout the whole month of February, which means that every single planet that leaves Aquarius has to square Uranus before it can enter Pisces. So squares are aspects that bring conflict, like conflicts of interest or obstacles or challenges that have to be intentionally overcome rather than like skirted around or avoided. And Uranus, the planet of innovation and disruption and chaos and change, typically does this through some sort of surprise that comes from our external world. It's not necessarily from within, it's from without. And with Uranus and Taurus squaring Venus and Aquarius, we might see this as something like out of our control in our physical realm, like stopping the idealism in its tracks. Venus in Aquarius highly values the balance between independence and collaboration, and seeks connection through radical acceptance of our authenticity and uniqueness. Taurus, on the other hand, is more concerned with moving slowly, steadily, and typically upholding the status quo. Like Taurus just wants things to be normal. So I think we might see this interaction as like a clapback to our brazen embodiment of our authenticity. So like we may be like, yo, this is the way to go. And then something from reality is like, is it though? It may feel shocking, surprising, or even hurtful, but like, I need you to hold on to that authenticity. I need you to hold fast to your values, your freedom, your power, and remember that people and systems are not going to like that. And that's fine. That's fine. We don't need them to like that. Like, we have been conditioned by our current societal structure to conform in order to stay safe. But I think we're all at this point where we realize that conformity isn't giving us the safety that it promised it would. So even when we are ridiculed or gaslit or shut down or clapped back at, it's so important to stay true to what we know to be true for us and our families and our communities. And the good news is, once we get past that square with Uranus, we get a run of Venus and Pisces without Saturn there, which is fantastic, okay? Because 4 days after Venus moves into Pisces, Saturn moves into Aries. And we haven't had a Venus and Pisces run without Saturn there for like 3 years. So Venus is going to get to run free for a hot second. And I genuinely think this is going to feel so fucking good, you guys. Like, while there's no shortage, bear with me, there's no shortage of intensity happening throughout this month, I do think this particular transit is going to remind us what it is we're fighting for, and even bring a bit of whimsy or indulgence or celebration to kind of flavor the whole month. So if at any point you find yourself wallowing or frustrated or sliding towards despair, all valid reactions, by the way, I do encourage you to root back into this transit, this Venus and Pisces energy, this celebratory, sweet, splashy fun, and remind yourself why any of this matters in the first place. Especially because the next thing I want to talk about is Saturn moving into Aries. Now, there are plenty of astrologers and resources out there doing deep dives on this Saturn through Aries transit, so I'm not going to do that here right now. But what I will say is this is the beginning of a big pivot point in the month. This move begins probably the most active week of the month, because on Saturday the 14th or like Friday the 13th in the night, Saturn officially moves into Aries, beginning its conjunction with Neptune at 0 degrees, okay? On Tuesday, the 17th, then we have our first solar eclipse, on that Leo Aquarius axis I mentioned earlier. On Wednesday the 18th, Sun enters Pisces, and on the 20th, Saturn and Neptune's conjunction goes exact. So it's just like bing, bang, boom, 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 all at once. Which is a lot. But there is good news, because on Sunday the 22nd, we end up with one of the most lovely astrology days of the whole month, which is a Venus and Jupiter trine while the moon is in Taurus. So I will get back to that. But let's rewind, briefly touch on this Saturn and Aries transit. I have to strap myself in for this one. So Saturn is the planet of responsibility, boundaries, structure, authority, systems, limitations, duty. Saturn comes in and gets everything in line, eradicating chaos and establishing order. That is his modality. That is what he's here to do. Aries is a cardinal fire sign ruled by Mars, which is quite literally the antithesis of Saturn's energy as a whole. Like, Saturn is actually said to be in its fall in Aries, which means that it doesn't have the tools it typically needs to do his job. So Saturn has to get really creative here, which means using Aries' Martian-esque tools to establish order. And what tools does Aries have at its disposal? We've got fire. We've got action. When we think about combining Saturn's prowess with the tools that Mars leaves behind in Aries, we get literal martial action, like martial arts, physical fighting, organization of troops, battle strategies, if you're catching my drift. So this is where I want to get extremely honest with you, because as we look at Saturn and Aries, one of the most literal translations is martial law. Saturn and Aries can be extremely authoritarian. I think we're already seeing the direction that energy is flowing on both a local and global scale. So I feel like I don't necessarily need to dive super deep into that, but and let me be clear that this is in no way intended to scare you, but rather to prepare you. Because yes, Saturn and Aries can spell tyranny on a world leader scale, but we are also experiencing this energy on a personal and a collective level. We also have access to this experience of reclaiming power, autonomy, and rebellion. So I just want to encourage you on that front, you know, like Saturn and Aries wants to do something and do it now. But Saturn also knows that things take time. So I think our patience will be tempered and our willpower strengthened during this transit. So I encourage it, like all of us, to identify a channel for this energy early on, okay? Take a kickboxing or self-defense class. Start a walking or running group in your neighborhood. Develop an intentional rage practice. Like, get in touch with a part of you that wants to tear it all down and find a way to let it out in a constructive way. That is Saturn and Aries. Have hope. Don't worry. You got this. In the midst of this outer planet transition, we get our first solar eclipse in Aquarius. So for the last few years, we've been having eclipses on the Virgo-Pisces axis, which brought a lot of big changes and realizations around the connection between our dreams and our practical actions. We started recognizing our desires to follow our dreams and build a better world, like as the North Node drew our attention to Pisces, yet we struggled to put those steps into physical action while the South Node transited Virgo. So this is kind of the amalgamation of this whole process now. This past eclipse cycle in mutable signs was very much a hallmark of a shift in collective consciousness. I think we definitely started to break through the illusions that have held us captive through Neptune's time in Pisces and started to experiment with what service to our world and community actually looks like in practice. Like, there's been a lot of hunger for getting back in person and for showing up for our communities, but a lot of like kind of scatteredness on how we actually do that. So now it's time for our fixed friends, Leo and Aquarius, to take the lead. This new moon solar eclipse in Aquarius does feel like the seed of a revolution being planted extremely intentionally, okay? Aquarius is a fixed air sign ruled by Saturn, where Capricorn is the sign where Saturn does, moves, builds, and creates physical structure. Aquarius is where Saturn envisions its next evolution, where Pisces dreams of beauty and love and dissolving boundaries to invite this boundless oneness type vibe. Aquarius dreams of a new world order where boundaries are made of unbreakable glass and portals gives us access to anywhere, everywhere, all at once. Like, it's very futuristic. It's very idealist. What's interesting about the Leo-Aquarius axis is it presents us with this dichotomy of individualism versus socialism. And not just like on an economic or a governmental level, but like every level. Where Leo wants to take center stage, Aquarius wants to make the audience itself the stage, like wants to go into the audience and find the stories there. Where Leo yearns for the spotlight, Aquarius knows the value of working in the shadows. Where Leo is unafraid to use their voice to speak up and stand out, Aquarius wants to organize a collective voice to speak up and enact lasting change while preserving everyone's individuality. So this is not to say that one of these energies is more valuable than the other by any means. We need both. I think the full moon in Leo at the beginning of the month actually is an excellent time to root back into our individual power and remind ourselves of how much we can accomplish when we are unafraid of what we can do. However, the stupid hair is like in my mouth. However, as the North Node draws our attention to Aquarian ideals and the South Node invites us to relinquish some of our Leonian traits, I can't help but feel like this is a massive turning point in American individualism at the very least. Historically, eclipses have been heralds of major beginnings and major endings. So take a peek at what houses these two signs occupy in your natal chart for clues as to what topics may experience a reinvention during this eclipse cycle. But collectively, with Saturn and Aries ruling these Aquarian eclipses, I think we're going to feel even more deeply called to take immediate, impactful action on behalf of our communities rather than default to an every man for himself mentality. On the very next day after that eclipse, the sun enters Pisces, meaning that it will just have squared that Uranus before the eclipse on the 17th. Similar to the Venus square earlier in the month, this will be a surprise, a hiccup, or a conflict that feels like an attack on our identity. So it may leave us feeling powerless at first, especially since it's happening on the same day as that new moon solar eclipse. Even symbolically, the moon, our feelings, emotions, our bodily experience, will be eclipsing or standing in the way of the sun, our willpower, our identity, our ego, our vitality. To me, this sounds like something beyond our control, triggers an emotional response that temporarily makes us forget our power, but ultimately shifts our direction and sets us on a new path. So this could be a really powerful reset of our values, ideals, or goals that changes our trajectory for the next 2-ish years, because eclipses kind of go in these cycles where we're going through big endings and beginnings in the same area of our chart for that amount of time. But after that, the sun will join Venus and Mercury in the newly malefic free Pisces for a bit of a gallivant, a bit of a walkabout. Like, yes, we'll have a Mercury retrograde very soon after this, and Mars will indeed be coming in to be the party pooper once March kicks off. But for a hot second, we almost get this like little healing balm where we can take a breath, sink into the hot springs with our besties, like, and let the steam just clear us out for a minute. But also not at all, because at the same damn time, Saturn and Neptune's conjunction at 0 degrees of Aries does go exact. In the Substack article I wrote about Neptune and Aries, I described this conjunction as the siren and the old one meeting on the shores of the Red Desert after emerging from the deep and facing an army of soldiers on horseback before them, readying a war cry that will command this ragtag horde into action. And to me, that is exactly what this feels like. Neptune is the siren. It's this voice that romanticizes whatever themes she is surrounded by in order to draw people in and submit to her whimsy in a way rather than take authority over themselves. Meanwhile, Saturn, the old one, the one who has seen great nations rise and fall and knows exactly what needs to happen to make it all work, together in Aries, these two are very much ready to tear shit down, okay? It's, historically, these two meet every 36-ish years. So the last conjunction was in Capricorn in 1989, which coincided with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War. So you had Neptune and Saturn in order-contained Capricorn, and we saw the dismantling of structures that no longer made sense or served the overall system. Okay. Before that was a conjunction in Virgo in 1952 to 53, which marked the polio epidemic and the Great Smog of London. So Neptune and Saturn in health-oriented Virgo showed us the dismantling of health and environment that dictated a need for change. We had the rise of the polio vaccine. A lot of environmental change came after this as well. Before that was Pisces in 1917, which coincided with the Russian Revolution. So Neptune and Saturn in dreamy, illusory Pisces, and the dismantling of imperialism came along in favor of an idiocracy that was incorrectly labeled as socialism, which ended up being this dream unable to be realized due to a lack of practical organization, which is very, very Piscean in nature. And now they meet in Aries, the spark, the fire, the soldier ready to charge into battle without a thought for their own safety. all in a time when we're seeing the rise of authoritarianism, colonialism, and state-sanctioned violence. Yeah, it's exactly what you think. If it's sounding like revolution, it's because it is. It's because it sounds like a revolution. By degrees, this formation is in a sextile with Uranus at 28 degrees of Taurus. It's not exact, but it's just a few degrees away here. So I would not be shocked at all if the surprising events that we experience during those Uranus squares I was talking about happening throughout the month end up being connected to whatever comes to light during this particular conjunction. And let's also be clear that this conjunction is not like a full moon that happens on one day and then kind of like fades away. Saturn is already applying to this conjunction and has been, and then will be co-present with Neptune for its entire time in Aries. This is more indicative of an overall vibe that will color not only the rest of the month, but the rest of Saturn's time in Aries through 2027. So I would imagine we will see some very specific events taking place throughout the month that will set us on that trajectory, but it's not like we're waiting for this one day to see those significations come to life. I mean, we're already seeing it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, we're watching it happen in front of our eyes. The one thing I will say is that ice does not stay frozen in a fiery desert where everyone is armed with blowtorches. Okay, so while that does give me some hope, it also gives me caution because these ice cubes are just the product of a much larger machine that is most likely creating icicle spears and projectiles and whatever else behind the scenes. So once again, this is a great time to abandon the every man for himself mentality and get connected with fellow blowtorchers that you trust. Okay, so after all of that chaos, we get the loveliest day of the month on Sunday, the 22nd. Hello, I don't know why I can't speak there, but it's 222 to February 22nd. So hello angel numbers, hello benefics, hello Gorgina moon placement. We love to see it all. On this day, it's definitely like this hope-infusing, celebratory, encouraging, restful feeling type of day. We have Venus in Pisces, where she loves to be, trining Jupiter in Cancer, where he loves to be. And since Jupiter rules Pisces, this whole alignment is just really powerful, really lovely, and really special, which we freaking need in the midst of this month. So I'm very much excited for it, if you can't tell. Trines allow energy to flow seamlessly between two planets, and when they have reception in this way where Venus is in Jupiter's house, not to be confused with the houses, but thinking of Pisces like being Jupiter's house, they have a direct line. This trine is a direct line for them to gab and chat. It's like they're FaceTiming. So now Venus knows exactly where all the good snacks are, knows the best vantage point to spy on the neighbors, knows where to order the best food from, how to work the giant jet tub, like all the things. It honestly looks like such a sigh of relief and a huge reestablishment of confidence, joy, whimsy, rejuvenation, which we will be in need of, considering we still have a couple challenging transits to get to before the end of the month. I'm so sorry, but it's where we're at. On this day, I also mentioned that we will have the moon in Taurus, where she loves to be. All of these planets are in signs of their like exaltation, which is stunning. And she'll be ruled by Venus, and she'll be sextiling both Venus and Jupiter. So it's almost like Venus and Jupiter are FaceTiming on this day, and suddenly Venus gets a text from the moon like asking, where's your new serum that you mentioned? Can I use it? I saw it on the counter. And Venus is like, oh my God, let me add you to the FaceTime call. And so then she adds in the moon, and like these three are just like yapping and having a remote spa day together. Very cute. I love this day. So plan something nice for yourself for this day, like a literal spa day, something self-care oriented, something social where you can be with people that you love and feel supported and excited and seen by and just comforted by each other's presence as well. Like in the midst of all the chaos going on this month and this year in general, Loki, we do need to prioritize maximizing these types of days so that we can preserve our whimsy, so we can preserve our community, our joy, our love, the things that make all of this worth it. Especially because just a few days later, Mercury officially stations retrograde. I know I already touched on this at the beginning, talking about Mercury retrograde, but this is where we slow down and realize, okay, I need to actually go back and get my shit together. I think after all of the intense buildup of the month to that Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and now we're going to be like living in that space, we're really going to need that benefic day on the 22nd to relax and rejuvenate before diving back into meaningful action. Because once this Mercury retrograde kicks off, we're going to find ourselves knee deep in some intense nervous system activation. Mercury does rule the nervous system and also rules technology. So we're going to need to navigate some technological disruption that everything's just going to need our attention. Okay, so I want to encourage you that if you find yourself feeling foggy, feeling hazy, unable to string your words together, unable to figure out how to be decisive or intentional, that'll be completely normal for this transit, okay? We just have to learn how to work with that kind of energy. So this retrograde will be about figuring out how to move through that fog when our headlights are out and we have to go 5 miles an hour to make sure we don't hit a deer or something. Like, it's not fun and it's not cute, but it does build up, especially in Pisces, our instincts, our intuition, and reorients us towards peace and community and purpose. The day after Mercury stations, we get a Ceres and Chiron conjunction in Aries as well. So Ceres and Chiron are not major planets like we would typically talk about. They're minor planets, sometimes called asteroids, that take on meaning from the mythology that they were named for. Ceres was a Roman goddess associated with crops, agriculture, fertility, motherhood, typical agricultural goddess. As like this type of fertility goddess, she was also involved in cycles of life and death, and often venerated within both marriages and funeral rites. So her transits show us what cycles we're going through, what stage of that kind of life cycle we're in, what we need to bring to life, what we need to grieve or let go of, and what we are learning how to protect and nurture, what we need to be pouring more energy into to let that grow. Chiron was a centaur in Greek mythology who was known as a healer and a teacher. The catch with Chiron was that despite his ability to heal and teach others, he could not heal his own wound. So he's known as the wounded healer. And in our astrology charts, Chiron points to places where we have been deeply wounded and thus are uniquely positioned to heal others, but may struggle to heal this wound within ourselves. These two minor planets coming together in Aries feels extremely potent coming off of that Neptune and Saturn conjunction just a few degrees away as we're heading into the Mercury retrograde. Like, I think this transit will point to a pain that can no longer be ignored and must be grieved, tended to, and healed. But once again, the catch will be we cannot tend to this alone. It's not something, and we're going to want to do it alone because it's an Aries. We're going to feel like all of these Aries transits, honestly, are things that we're going to be like, I need to handle this on my own. Like, I need to do something. I need to go and go. Like, Aries wants to dive in and get it done. Leap without looking, like, accept the consequences, no questions asked, no holds barred. But this astrology really paints a picture of the pain that is possible if we do not work together to harness this energy and take intentional steps to make change. Because let me be clear, change is coming. Change is not only possible, but it is extremely probable, if not guaranteed. And I just worry that this abundance of impulsive Aries energy may encourage independent action that will ultimately cause more harm than good. So this particular Ceres and Chiron conjunction feels important. It feels extremely cathartic, like a good yell, scream, cry, journal, voice memo, somatic shake, kickboxing class, right, Ralph? Something that will help us tap into the power of our pain and our grief. It feels like the alcohol or the salt in the wound that will start our healing journey, even if it brings a little bit more pain at first. And I think that release will be particularly important considering the final transit of the month is a Mars-Uranus square, while the sun, at the same time, conjoins the North Node in Pisces for the very last time. We've already touched on what those squares to Uranus might feel like from the perspective of Venus and the sun. Mars, however, is another type of energy altogether, where Venus may internalize Uranus's chaotic challenge, and the sun may take it like personally in a way. It'll still use it as a stepping stone for taking it power, but it'll hurt it a little bit at first. Mars is simply going to fight back. Every time. Every time. When Mars and Uranus meet in any aspect, chaos typically follows. This is like taking an accelerant, Uranus, and pouring it on an open flame, Mars. The song like, "We're Not Gonna Take It" by, I think it's Twisted Sister, that's what's coming to mind right now. Because like where the Venus and the sun likely responded to Uranus's inciting action, Mars is just gonna rise to the challenge and stand his ground. Meanwhile, the sun is meeting up with the North Node in Pisces. So this is a once yearly meeting, and this is the last one in Pisces. So this is a day when we will be reminded of our felt purpose, of, once again, like what we are fighting for to begin with. It's going to remind us about our why. The North Node in Pisces has been redirecting our attention to collective consciousness, spirituality, belief, hope, but sometimes to a point of idealism rather than practical action. So the sun is bringing in our will and our physical vitality, reminding us that this is not just a dream that's out of reach. Like, our hope is our power. Our belief is our fight. Our collective consciousness is more, I would argue, more connected than maybe it's ever been before, since we're able to connect so readily and easily. And that is not a gift to be squandered at this moment. So I think this energy signature closes the month with a righteous anger that reinvigorates our fervor for action. It's kind of just the signature of the entire month, to be honest. There's so much energy around action and responding to chaos and reconnecting with what really truly matters on not only a personal, but a deeply collective level as well. So this is by no means a cutesy month. This is a month that I actually, as an astrologer, have been looking at for years. And there are many, many other astrologers and intuitives and practitioners out there who have incredible breakdowns if you're looking to dive deeper. I will definitely put some in the description below if you want to explore further. But even if you're not an astrologer or energy worker by trade, you can feel the energy amping up. We are at a point where things are heavy and scary and fiery and moving so fast. And I have personally been sitting with a lot of anger and grief and frustration and restlessness. And it's all been driving me to just fucking move and do something. And it's complicated, holding all of these feelings while also having to show up as a creator and a friend and a partner and a worker. But I think that's part of the magic that this period of time holds for us, is learning how to weave these big revolutionary feelings into the fabric of our day-to-day reality rather than shoving them down or letting them explode without direction. So that's where I think we need to remind ourselves that even when we feel out of control, we have access to people and practices and systems that do support and uplift and align with our values. So if you are feeling anxious or angsty about this month, I want to validate that. It's a lot. Like, you're allowed to have feelings about this. But I also want to remind you that you have power here. You have power over what you do, who you spend your time and energy with, and how you care for yourself and your community. So just do what you can where you can. As an ex-evangelical, it feels weird to quote scripture, but there's like this one part of a psalm that has been playing over in my head a lot lately, which is take courage and have heart. Like, take courage for yourself, call it in, find out what it feels like to embody that courage, and have heart. Like, hold your values and your joy and your love and your people close. Believe that the fight is worth it, that you are worth it, and that we're all in this together. So that's all for now, I think. If you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below. If you'd like a personal reading, I am booking those on my website, rebel-daughter.com. But for now, just take courage, have heart, stay strong. I love you, Rebels. Bye.